fundraiser for the Student Wildlands Adventure Program. Tonight we have two prominent guests, Janis Putelis, as well as Karl Malcolm. Karl, again, is having some difficulty getting here, but we also have a number of other folks that we want to give introductions to because they've been tremendously helpful with this Student Wildlands Adventure Program. The first person I want to bring up, first off, my name is Daryl Radijak. I'm one of the co-founders for SWAP. I'm a career wildlife biologist. I used to be the chief of wildlife and forestry for the state of Tennessee.
Hey,
Wanted
Daryl,
to pursue.
Record.
Oh,
you
I will tell everyone we are recording tonight. We got to give that reminder. Thanks, Robert, for bringing that up. So to get started here, my name is Daryl Radijak. I'm one of the co-founders for the Student Wildlands Adventure Program. I was the chief of wildlife and forestry for the state of Tennessee for a number of years. I headed out west about 5 or 6 years ago to pursue a boyhood dream of living and working in the Rockies, and I was one of the founding members of the SWAP program. The other founding member is Robert Brewer. Robert, if you want to introduce yourself, go right ahead.
I'm Robert Brewer. I'm not a traveler. My family hit Tennessee before Tennessee was a state, and we've been here ever since. Born and raised in Knoxville, still live in Knoxville, drive 90 miles one way to work, so I don't have to leave Knoxville. So unlike Daryl, I'm not a traveler, but I'm the director of the Greg A. Vidal Center for Natural Resources and Conservation at Cleveland State, and I started and run the only 2-year forestry, wildlife, and fisheries program in the state of Tennessee.
Thanks, Robert. I appreciate that. The other one I want to bring to note is Jesse Dubell, who, Jesse, if you want to introduce yourself, go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Daryl. My name is Jesse Dubell. I'm the executive director of the New Mexico Wildlife Federation. We're a nonprofit organization founded in 1914 by Aldo Leopold. Our mission is to protect public land, waters, and wildlife for all, and we've been doing it since 1914. So we are the state's oldest and largest sports persons advocacy group. We advocate for public lands. We get involved in state and federal policy, and just super proud to be here with all of you tonight. Thank you all for taking the time to support this very worthy cause of the Student Wildlands Adventure Program. It's a program the Wildlife Federation has supported for a number of years, and it's just a fantastic program. So I appreciate all of you joining us here.
I appreciate that, Jesse. And since Karl has not yet joined us, I'll let our guest speaker introduce himself. Janis Putelis, if you want to tell us a little bit about you, who you are, and then after you do that introduction, I want to do a little slide presentation for you to give you a little bit more idea about this Student Wildlands Adventure Program.
Sure. So we can save time save more time for more fun later. I'll keep it short and sweet. But yeah, my name is Janis Putelis. I'm a content producer for Meateater. I've been over here for almost 10 years now and done everything here from produce podcasts to television shows. And now I produce my own YouTube show called Meateater Hunts with Janis Putelis. Still co-host the podcast with Steve. Yeah, and I'm very honored to be invited here to participate in this and tell a few stories and help you guys raise a little money for this project.
Awesome. Appreciate that, Janis. So what we want to do today, folks, because most of you might know about SWAP, but there's a few, and in particular, Janis may not know as much about this Student Wildlands Adventure Program as the other folks. So what I was going to do is just do a little 5-minute presentation to let you know what this program is all about. So if I could do this share screen and get it to work properly, we'll go from there. All right. Well, hopefully everyone can see the photo that is up there. And to give you an idea of why we're raising money, why we brought everyone together tonight for this wonderful, wonderful program, we're going to talk a little bit about SWAP and what it is. Let me just back up real quickly, just to let you know that when we're talking about SWAP, you have to know the backstory in order to appreciate what's going on here. So one day, I'll tell you, for those that don't know, I used to be in Tennessee along with Robert. about 5 years ago, I traveled out west. I took a job with the U.S. Forest Service in the Southern Rockies, northern New Mexico. And I was going to all these places. Now, just so you know, Robert's a really good friend of mine. He's a professor at the small community college teaching wildlife biology. And during my travels, after I moved to New Mexico, I would text Robert. I'd take pictures of either like a herd of 100 elk or just some amazing landscape. And I do what all good friends do. I used to tease him. I used to show him these pictures of all these crazy and cool things I used to be seeing. And one day I sent Robert this amazing photograph of what I was looking at in northern New Mexico. And jokingly, I said, hey, Robert, you got to figure out how to bring you and your wildlife students out here to see all this stuff. And a few seconds passed and the text came back to me and Robert just said, let's do it. And so I give all the credit to Robert that first year. He busted his ass. He got a small grant through the cultural department at the small community college he worked at. And they had just enough money to buy airline tickets for 14 of his students and to rent a couple of vehicles. And it is up to me on my end to put together a week-long, actually 9 days of amazing adventures and learning, that's a key thing, in the Southern Rockies for these students. And we ended up doing it, and it was absolutely amazing, that trip. And so from that point, we developed this nonprofit group now. It's called the Student Wildlands Adventure Program. We are 501c3. We did everything official. And so the goal of this program is we're trying to impact a youth's life by giving them direction, and mostly direction and inspiration, and trying to instill in them that idea of pursuing that career in wildlife management or some type of natural resource protection. Because Robert, working at a small community college, he was getting a lot of these freshmen and sophomores that didn't know what they wanted to do in life. And so by providing this inspiration, we wanted them to say, man, this is exactly what I want to do. Or on the flip side, you might have a student or two say, you know what, I'm not cut out for this. Either way, it's a win-win for the student. The way we do this inspiration is we take these students out of their comfort zone. We take them from where they probably lived and grew up their whole life, and we show them some amazing destinations, amazing landscapes, amazing wildlife, amazing cultures. And we give them this opportunity that they otherwise would not receive. We try to focus on students from these underserved communities. And not everyone comes from an underserved community, because we want that diversity, but the ones that do come from those underserved areas, they're given top priority in the selection process. And so that is the overall goal of this program that we're doing. And so the very first program we did, again, Robert brought 14 of his students to New Mexico in the summer of 2017. Amazing trip. I will tell you that was flying by the seat of our pants. We didn't have the 501c3. We were sleeping on cots in my backyard, and I forgot to tell my wife I was bringing 16 people over to sleep in the backyard, but she has since forgiven me. But it is an amazing, amazing adventure. The following year, and this is why we named it what we did, is the following year we wanted to do it again. It was such a good thing. I told Robert, you know, if you brought your students from the East out to the West, I want to do the same thing. I want to take some Western students and take them East. So what we did in 2018 is we took 16 students. The vast majority were from the Navajo Nation or the Pueblos or of Hispanic descent. We selected them. We took them to the Smoky Mountains, which was amazing because these students in the Southwest were not used to living in and seeing water. And so the theme of that trip was water is life. And we took them snorkeling, we took them whitewater rafting. It was the most amazing thing. And it just totally impacted these students who would never, ever get to see that. In fact, one of them applied for graduate school at the University of Tennessee after that trip. We came back the following year, since we're now swapping back and forth, hence the acronym. Robert brought, 2 years ago, Robert brought, how many did you have? Was it 15 or 16?
Something like that. I could count them.
We brought Tennessee, a new batch of students from the Southeast. We took them back to New Mexico. that trip was spectacular because we had a theme of walking in the footsteps of Aldo Leopold. Aldo Leopold obviously is father of wildlife conservation. And so we toured around the Gila National Forest, where not far from where Aldo watched the green fire die in that wolf's eyes. We toured around the Aldo Leopold Wilderness. That was the first half of the trip. And then we went up to the Carson National Forest and we actually stayed in Aldo Leopold's cabin. And I think the greatest part, I'm getting goosebumps right now, the greatest part of that trip was those students, about half of them purchased a New Mexico fishing license. They caught wild trout in the Rio de los Pinos River. And that night we sat in the Aldo Leopold cabin that he built by hand for his wife. And we ate wild caught trout, and Jeremy Romero cooked us elk fajitas from New Mexico. So absolutely amazing adventure. We were going to do it again last year. We were going to take Southwestern students back to Tennessee last year, but as everyone knows, COVID hit. So we had to cancel last year's trip, or at least let's say we postponed it. So because we missed a year, we wanted to go bigger and better this year. And so what our plan is, and in fact, it's well underway. We still have some fundraising to do. But what our plan is for 2021, we are going to take a crew from Tennessee and a crew from the Southwest, and we're heading to Yellowstone and the Grand Teton National Forest. And so we're really excited about that trip. We have almost all the monies raised. We're still running really tight, so anything else we could find would be greatly assist that trip. But we're scheduled to go this July. We're going the last week of July. We're going to fly into Salt Lake City. And I know a number of students on tonight's webinar they're participating in the trip. So I think you're in for the time of your life. The thing is, this isn't just a fun, hey, let's get out and have a good time type of thing. This is educational. Every field trip is meant to teach the students a lesson. We'll have a day learning about fire. We'll have a day where we're doing some of the grizzly work in Yellowstone. We're going to try to get a day dedicated to wolves. So it's going to be an amazing adventure this year, and we're really, really looking forward to it. I will tell you, I don't think Karl has joined in yet, but Karl has participated in 2 of the previous ones. Back in 2017, Karl joined us. He was one of the crew leaders when we were up on the Valles Caldera up in northern New Mexico. You can see him there in the blue shirt with the hat on. He was one of our instructors for the day. This is us prior going on a mountain lion or a cougar field trip where we're checking some scratching posts. And so he joined us on that one. And then the last one we had, Karl joined us at the Aldo Leopold cabin. You can see he didn't change his shirt at all, but 2 years later, he pontificated on the rocks behind Aldo Leopold's cabin. And I'll tell you, he is one of the most amazing, brilliant minds there is when it comes to wildlife conservation. So hopefully you could join in, but he's been absolutely fantastic helping us out on these previous 2 events. So just so you know, how do we do this? We don't get any giant corporate donations, or we don't get any federal grants. We just have a ton of people helping us out. And so people like the federal agencies or state agencies will donate people to lead a field trip, but we have pizza places donating pizzas here and there. We scrape by the skin of our teeth every year, but it's the most amazing thing. And we got to thank all of our partners who help us with that. And so anyway, the last thing I'm going to say is SWAP. Once they go on the trip, that is not the end of their adventure. That is where their story begins, because these students, if you follow the students that we've impacted, they're just phenomenal students, and you can tell just how much that trip means to them and truly has altered the course of their life for a few of those students. And that is the ultimate goal for this SWAP program. And so it's just a really cool thing. We want to keep this going as long as possible. And again, I can't thank everyone enough for their support and participation, and Janis for helping us out with this thing. So with that, Robert, do you want to add anything to that brief presentation?
I'm not sure I could add anything to it. I know we have a couple of people here that in today that have been on it. And, but I don't know that I could add anything to it, Daryl.
Okay. Janis, do you have any questions whatsoever about what we're doing and where we're going and how we got here?
I don't think so, other than just like, how do you guys find time to do all these great things? Because this isn't like your normal job. You guys have regular jobs that require probably 50, 60 hours a week. So where do you find the time to like do this extracurricular stuff and help the community out?
Yeah.
Robert, you want to go first?
Yeah, you can sleep when you're dead. Now, I can't sit still anyway. Everybody in my family will tell you that. So I've got to have something to do. And I can't say no either. So no, you can sleep when you're dead. And so keep going, keep chugging. As long as I see smiles on faces and I know it makes an impact on them. Looking back through some of those pictures, I could pick out several that have already graduated from college. They have jobs in the field. Others are still in school. I know we're doing our job if I see that.
Yeah, and that sums it up. It is a ton of work. But the thing is, I swear, I look forward to this week more than any other week throughout the year. The work leading up to coordinating everything, doing the fundraising, making sure we got the volunteers, airline tickets, all that stuff lined up. The week itself, and Robert will agree, you get about 4 hours of sleep a night, if that, because you're getting up at 5 in the morning to cook breakfast. We did all this with minimal volunteers. We'd have 1 or 2 people. It's getting more and more people are asking to help us out, but you're up at 5 in the morning and you're going until about 1 o'clock at night, and then just repeat. I will tell you, some of the field trips we've done were absolutely phenomenal. From visiting cougar kills on the Baez Caldera with the National Park Service. We did a bighorn sheep study with New Mexico Wildlife Federation. Snorkeling, we're supposed to snorkel on the Conasauga River. Robert, tell them about the Conasauga River and the diversity there.
Okay, the Conasauga is the watershed for the Conasauga is tiny. And when I say tiny, smaller than most eastern counties, about half the size of a normal eastern county. And it just touches Tennessee. Most of it's in Georgia. But it has more fish species there. I think that they're up to like 88 or 89 fish species in a 1 mile stretch of river than if I were to add pretty much all the western watersheds together. So it's extraordinarily diverse system.
Yeah, and so we pick home run field trips where, like I said, where we're really teaching the students what they could potentially do if they stick with their studies, they graduate from college, whether or not they pursue a higher degree or just join the workforce from there. We want to show them, hey, this is what I could do if I stick with it. And the cool thing is, all throughout that week, we have the Fish and Wildlife Service, the State Wildlife Agency, the National Park Service, BLM. We have representatives from all those different agencies leading us on tours, doing all that stuff to show these kids. So these students are not only learning, but they're meeting people that could potentially, they could eventually work with down the road. So it's been just something that has fallen into place, so amazing. And like I said, this program is absolutely wonderful. But enough with the program. I just wanted you to have a good idea as far as why we're doing what we're doing. So with that, Janis, does anyone else have any questions on the program? Jesse or anyone else?
You know what, Daryl, I do have one question. Obviously, the New Mexico Wildlife Federation has been involved, I think, since the second year the program started. But a question for Robert. I'm curious if there's been significant engagement with the Tennessee Wildlife Federation, with Kendall Carter, Michael Butler, and the folks out there in Tennessee, because if not, maybe there's a real opportunity to get the Tennessee affiliate on board providing support as well.
Yeah, Michael Butler is actually a former classmate of mine. I've talked to him about it several times.
Okay, great. Thank you, Robert.
I also have a question too, Daryl. Is there an opening for me? Because I kind of want to go. So, I mean, Jesse, it's okay, right? I could be gone for 2 weeks. It's not a big deal. See, perfect.
Jesse, you're gonna have to arm wrestle Sarah because I already told Jesse if he can find his way up to Salt Lake City, then he could carpool it. We need someone else. So you work with Jesse, and if you want to volunteer for that week, we have the lodging. The big expense, and I'm being serious, the big expense is the airfare and a lot of that travel. So the lodging's already paid for this year. And then the one thing that I should have mentioned, when we do these trips, most of the food that we try to feed the students is wild game. I know the first year that they came to New Mexico, I killed an elk that year and they cleaned out my freezer, which I was happy. I never would have ate that whole elk, but we cleaned out my elk. Then when we went to Tennessee, Robert had a whole bunch of whitetail deer donated, I think from Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. And then the third year we did it, I took up a food drive, and we had oryx and javelina and elk and antelope. It was just amazing, all the food that we get donated. The bad thing is this year we're gonna be rendezvousing in Salt Lake City because that's where I'm moving to, but I don't have any contacts there yet. So I wish we could find someone in Salt Lake City area that could donate some wild game, because that would be nice to continue that tradition. So. Anyway, Sarah, talk with Jesse if you want to help us out, because we could use an extra hand around camp.
Cool. I will talk to him. Thanks. I was actually joking, but I was even going to offer to arm wrestle Jesse for the position, and I would have won anyways. So would have been good.
Okay. Well, I'm sure people didn't come here to listen to me talk. So, Janis, thank you so much for agreeing to come on here and help us out and talk to the audience here. Huge fan of the Meateater show, and just so everyone knows, the Meateater show it's about the only hunting show I'll watch on TV or listen to their podcast, because they're about conservation. A lot of stuff on TV today is more about the trophy or the prize at the end. And I will say the Meateater is absolutely fantastic in that it's not only about the meat that you secure, but it's about the experience. And so I'm just absolutely grateful that you agreed to come on today. So if there's anyone out there that is not familiar with the Meateater show, one of the things I asked Janis to do is to talk about a little experience, which I thought was phenomenal, about a hunt that he had on a Fognac Island in Alaska. So Janis, if you don't mind, if you could give us the background and tell us what occurred on that hunt, we'd be grateful.
Yeah, you bet. And I should have become a little more prepared to tell everybody where to go watch the episode that we filmed. I believe it's like in season 7 or so, which I think is still on Netflix. And if not, all old Meateater seasons are now available on YouTube. So between those two, you ought to be able to find it. I believe it's called, a Fognac elk, something along those lines. If you search that, you'd be able to find it. So yeah, just to give everybody a little background, at the time I was producing the show Meateater, and Stephen Ranella, the host, and another friend of ours, Remy Warren, had drawn elk tags for an island called a Fognac Island, which is part of the Kodiak Archipelago, which is I don't know how many air miles, but it's like, I think it's about an hour flight of Anchorage, kind of southwest, I guess it would be. So it's literally right next to the Kodiak Island, but a little bit smaller and definitely not as well known. And now I want everybody that's listening, if you're thinking about getting into one of these swap weeks in the future, pay real close attention, because Daryl is telling me that he's thinking about maybe trying to get a week on a Fognac Island in 2022. So this is important information here. Bring your rain gear. I'll tell you that, number one, and bring a tarp to put on top of your tarp, because it is a wet place. It never stops raining there. There are no rivers or streams because it's just like there's water just moving constantly down the entire mountain, hillside, however you want to put it. And I'm not exaggerating that. You literally walk, and if your foot rests, if you stop walking, water will be pooling up against the upside of your boot. And that's almost constant. So very hard to find a dry place to camp. We did find some a little bit higher ground, and it was near some trees. So we were able to tuck in under some trees and find some dry ground. But anyways, we're there filming an elk hunt. And this island is covered up in giant coastal brown bears. So much so that the Department of Game and Fish in Alaska sends you a letter that says, hey, if you kill an elk, we're just about guaranteeing that a brown bear will try to claim it at some point. So they give you like a long list of things to do, get the meat away from the carcass. When you're around there, always have someone, vigilant and looking in all directions for approaching bears, and, work in teams, never do it alone, make a lot of noise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So going into it, we were expecting to like see bears, have encounters with bears. But we hunt for like 4 or 5 days, and we hadn't seen a brown bear yet. We had seen a few tracks, but no brown bears. And so we let down our guard a little bit. We eventually kill an elk. We follow directions. We get the meat up into a tree, a good couple 100 yards away from the carcass, and we put it in a place where it's on what we thought at the time was an open hillside where we could view it from a distance when we had to come back to it. These elk that are on Afognak Island, they're actually non-natives. The population there comes from when wildlife managers just, we didn't know better. And at the time, it was just thought that it would be best to put game, anywhere it could live, we would just, put it there, and it would just be better for that. So I think it was about 100 years ago, they came from the Olympic Peninsula, and they put these Roosevelt elk up on Afognak. They are big bodied animals. 6 of us barely carried out half of one elk that first night that we killed the elk. So we had to come back in, and we were so tired from carrying it out and dealing with the environment and the weather that we'd actually taken a day off, and then came back about 36 hours later to retrieve the second half. So this is where the story starts to get a little more exciting. We're returning now to retrieve the rest of the meat. The meat's been hanging in a tree for 2 nights, and we're approaching at maybe 10 a.m. on a day after. And at about 200 yards from the tree, we get our binoculars out, we glass the whole area, we watch it for 20 minutes, no sign of a bear. And so then we approach. And as we approach with pistols drawn, bear sprays drawn, everybody's hooting and hollering, making a lot of noise. And we get to the tree where the meat's hanging. So kind of did everything right up till that point. Well, for whatever reason, and I still can't, think of what we were thinking. I'm guessing it's just that thing where you have too many people and you let your guard down from the power in numbers. But we decide to make sandwiches and have some tea sitting right underneath a half of an elk worth of raw meat in the middle of brown bear country. And I hope a lot of you are just shaking your heads thinking like, man, what an idiot, and his buddies. And you're right, we were in that moment. So we sit down, we had 6 of us there. Like I said, there was 2 people on camera, and there's 2 main videographers, myself, and then what we call a WPA, which in Meateater, on the Meateater team is a wilderness production assistant. And Pat was the wilderness production assistant. And when you're the WPA, one of your top responsibilities and tasks is to make a good sandwich. So Pat dishes out 6 sandwiches, and I distinctly remember him firing up that backpacking stove and the hiss of that backpacking stove as he's warming up some water to make everybody some tea. We're all sitting there about a couple bites into our sandwich, and we're in what's called alders. And alders are, if you've never been there, it's a willowy type tree that grows very, very thick. And sometimes it can be impassable. And so obviously if it's all around you, you're not gonna be able to see too far. But so we've got maybe 20 feet of open space either direction, on 3 sides, and then kind of downhill from us, we can see maybe 30 yards or so. So we're listening, we're having a bite of our sandwich, and Pat, well, I got to add one more thing. This is also a memory that sticks in my head from this story, is that Remy and I were noticing that Stephen Ranella's sandwich was a little bit bigger than ours, it seemed as though. And so we were commenting on this, like, hey, we're all here together. We're all working real hard. We all are expending the same amount of calories, it seems. Like, how come your sandwich, it looks like it's got so much more meat and cheese on it? And Steve says, well, if you want a sandwich like this, you can get your own hunting TV show, which I have now. So hopefully my sandwiches will get bigger. That's the last thing Steve said before Pat says, hey, did you hear that? And it kind of perks everybody's ears up. And the next thing out of Pat's mouth is, holy shit, bear. And usually when someone says like, holy shit, bear, you're like, oh, cool. Like, where's the bear? You look, everybody's gonna look in the distance and get your binoculars out, look at the bear. Well, this time the bear is like at 20 yards and running at us. Now, because we were so prepared for a bear encounter, I had sat down to eat my sandwich and placed my pistol right next to me. And I had my bear spray right on top of my hip in its little holster, but with the holster undone so I could quickly get to it. So I was seemingly prepared for this bear to come charging in. When he says, oh my gosh, bear, here comes this bear charging in. Now at this moment, I get, it's like everybody has the same story that was there. Everybody gets tunnel vision, and nobody can tell you what the person that was sitting right next to them did. Like how they threw their sandwich down when they saw the bear, or if the guy next to him stood up, or if they rolled over or whatever, because everybody was just solely focused on this brown mass of hair and fat and muscle and teeth and little beady yellow eyes, not really growling, but there was definitely teeth like coming at us. And he's coming full bore. We see him at 20 yards. It's happening really, really, really fast. So I can't speak for anybody else besides Garrett Smith, who I like to end with his story about what happens next. But I would have thought that I would have gotten to my pistol or my bear spray and then sprayed the bear, or maybe even try to shoot the bear. But instead, I somehow end up, I can't even tell you how I made it from on my butt eating a sandwich to I'm standing up, and I feel as though I'm in sort of like a Babe Ruth at home plate position, like I'm playing baseball and I'm going to be the hitter, and I'm holding 2 trekking poles grasped in my hands as though I'm going to swing them like they're a bat. And again, was not my plan. That's just how my body reacted, and it's where I was. And I remember thinking, just like everybody else in the group's thinking, like, this bear is coming to get me. It's going to roll over me. Like it is going down right now. So I thought, well, at least I'll go down swinging because I've got these trekking poles in my hand. And I figured at least there's 5 other people here. I know that one other person has a pistol, one other person has a rifle. Like the worst that'll happen is I'll get chewed on a little bit, maybe scratched a little bit before someone will be able to shoot the bear. What I wasn't expecting to happen is that I would swing these trekking poles, catch the bear somewhere in the face nose area, and that the bear would then about face, turn 180 degrees, and leap. Last thing I expected. It was as if I had hit a home run with a major league pitcher throwing a fastball at me. Like I would have expected to strike out, yet the ball went over the back fence. So pretty exciting. But what gets more exciting is that as the bear's leaving, Remy and I, we come out of tunnel vision, and now we both see this. We see, it looks as if though the bear is carrying away one of our compadres. We can't really tell who it is at the moment, but it looks as though the bear is carrying away a human. Well, what's happened, Garrett Smith, one of our great videographers at Meateater, he did the right thing. He got to his feet and got behind the tree that the meat was hung in and got a giant, fir tree between him and this charging bear, which is like definitely the smartest decision in that moment. But unfortunately, either someone else trips him up or he gets a little excited behind the tree and actually trips on an exposed root and sort of trips backwards. Like if you can imagine sort of tripping on your heels and sort of like, losing your balance and going backwards onto your butt or your back. Well, he does this and lands on top of the bear's back as the bear is trying to vacate this crazy scenario that he just ran into. I know it sounds like an unbelievable story and that like it's made up. I'm telling you, you can't make this kind of shit up. So Garrett rides the bear's back as he crests over the hill. He only probably rides the bear's back for a second or two. But Remy and I are in hot pursuit now with our pistols. And just as we get 2 steps going away, here comes Garrett back with eyes like this. I mean, I've never seen a human's eyes so wide open. And you can imagine yours would be the same way if you had just taken a ride on a grizzly bear's back. So yeah, there you go. That's pretty much the story of how a grizzly bear came in and disrupted our little sandwich and tea session that we were going to have. What still to this day probably sticks with me a lot is the sort of the feelings that I was overcome with in the moments and really actually probably hours after, coming so close to something that, very well could have gone a lot worse. And one, I felt like an overwhelming sensation, like a responsibility for everybody that I had hired there that was sort of like under my, purview. I was technically their boss on that trip. Steve and Remy had kind of come on their own accord. So I wasn't feeling bad for them, but for the guys that I had like put into that situation, I felt really, really bad for having put them through that because, you could call it, PTSD. I think there's, at least one of the guys that is still certainly slightly traumatized from that experience. But then the other feeling is I just remember wanting to hug my kids and my wife really, really bad in those moments following getting charged by that bear. So it's I don't want to say it's a fun story to retell. And people get a kick out of it, that you hit a bear with trekking poles, but it was definitely, it was serious. And I hope that I've learned my lesson about, when you go into grizzly bear country and you're going to deal with raw elk meat, that, you go and sit down somewhere where you can see like 200 yards every direction. And there's going to be no surprises unless one like flies over the top of your head and drops in from the sky on top of you. I'll leave it at that. If anybody's got any questions about other details about that story, I'll gladly answer them for you.
Yeah, we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. Before we do, I want to tell you that was one of my favorite episodes. And for the folks, if you don't see the television show, the podcast, there's a podcast called The Meat Poll. I think it's two
Meat
parts.
Tree.
The Meat Tree. And there's two parts to it. Fantastic listen. You got to have a listen. But I tell you how much that story resonates with me, because I teach bear and cougar safety classes all the time, Janis, and yeah, just trying to teach people what to do in a bear encounter is one thing. There's the book information that you can tell them, if the bear's doing this, your best reaction is to do this. But when it happens in real life, I laugh about it because I tell people what they should do, knowing full well that's going to scramble right out of their brain. And I'll tell you a situation. Stephanie Payne joined us. She's one of the other board members from SWAP. And she could relate to this story, so could Robert Brewer. But we were in East Tennessee, and I was on the trail with Stephanie Payne one time, and it was bear season, and Stephanie and I were way up on the mountain, and lo and behold, we hear these dogs getting closer and closer, and we look at the ridge, and literally 50, 60 yards away, up over the ridge, comes this bear, and it is barreling down at me and Stephanie. And it was, soon as we saw it, it was going to bowl us over. We were standing on the same trail that bear was. And it's like things slowed down, but it was happening so fast. And I told Stephanie, I said, you got to shoot the bear because it's coming right at us. And she had a high-powered rifle. She could drop down on one knee, and she's like, I can't find it. I can't find it. And it's getting closer, and it's bearing down in a matter of like seconds. And she's like, I can't find it. And she goes, take it. And I had a shotgun on my back, and I had 3 rounds in it. The very first thing I did, here I train people on what they should do. The first thing I did when I pulled that gun up, and the bear was no more than 20 yards, full-blown charge. The first thing I did, I ejected the first round. It just goes flying out. And so I got 2 rounds left. I missed 2 times. I don't know if I was shooting from the hip, but you don't know how your body's going to react when suddenly there's a bear that's like bearing down on you. And so I can totally relate to that story. Stephanie, I think I unmuted you because did you want to say something about that particular event?
Yeah. Well, not about that event, actually. It's about Janis's event. So I just wanted to tell him it's actually, don't ever try to, unless you're specifically trained for the situation of trying to shoot a bear while it's actively attacking a person. We actually see a lot of fatalities that occur that way, with actually the bullet being the culprit rather than the bear species that happens to be attacking a person at that time. So in my other life, I also do wildlife human attack response training, and we actually cover very specifically predators when they're actively attacking someone, how to approach that. So I'm going to tell you right now, you didn't go wrong by nobody trying to take that shot, because that's a very, very precarious situation. But in addition to that, yeah, Daryl did a terrible job at getting him and I out of danger whenever that bear was coming full bore at us. And for the record, he was not literally shooting from the hip. I would know, because I think I went deaf in one ear, because it was the barrel of his gun was about probably 4 inches away from my ear. Granted, it was sticking out well in front of me, but definitely it was a moment of deafness after that. So great story though.
All right. Is there anyone from the audience that wants to ask a question about Janis's bear adventure thing? Because there's been a question or two for Janis, but anything in particular with that first story he told? I appreciate you relating that story. That was one of my favorite stories from all the podcasts. And since I deal with bear behavior and bear response, that was something I wanted to hear firsthand. So I appreciate that, Janis. All right, Chris Red, if you don't mind, you posted a question in the chat box, so I am going to try to unmute you. So if you want to ask Janis a question, you can go right ahead.
Hey, Janis. My question was, I'm a huge fan of the show and the podcast as well. As far as at least the show goes, what has been your favorite hunt or species that you guys have gone after? I was a huge fan of the episode where you guys went moose hunting with your dad. And then I'm also a big fan of when Steve and Danny went out for talk management, Doll sheep, and got skunked. But I still really liked their sort of, I guess, attitudes and their perseverance through that hunt. But what's been your favorite as far as the show goes?
That's a tough one to answer because I've been very fortunate with this job to go and really go to a lot of cool places, and it's really probably the places more than the species, that looking back on it that make it, a cool trip and just an exciting trip. Certainly taking my dad, moose hunting and having him get a moose was, phenomenal, and just it was one of the few episodes where we went in with like a real plan around what the story was going to be, because we knew we were going to be sort of exploring, father-son relationships. Steve was going to talk a lot about that, and lo and behold, we did it, and it came out that way. Most often when we make Meateater, we go in with one idea of what the story is going to be, and then the editors come out with a different story in the end. But probably one of my favorites, I wouldn't say it's not something I really want to do again because I'm not a jungle person. The jungle is just like too hot for me. It's too uncomfortable. I'd rather endure, temperatures, well below zero than just 90 degrees and 90% humidity all the time. But going down and hanging out with the Chimani Indians down in Bolivia was just super cool. From just seeing how they lived in their villages to getting to walk around in the jungle with the hunters, and seeing how they did it, hunting at night. And then obviously that's when we got to, eat the monkey that those guys killed. But that was just a real, it's an experience that I may never get to do again. And certainly makes me feel like a wealthier person after doing it.
I will add, Janis, how much hunting with my dad means to me. My dad's in the back room. He's the spitting image of Frank Costanza from Seinfeld, but he does love to hunt. But he's 86 years old, and he's still 85 years old. He'd throw a shoe at me if I got that wrong. He still loves to hunt, and I try to get out there with him as much as I can. And some of the greatest stories are when you're hunting with your dad. Jesse, I think you can kind of speak to this a little bit. I always love hearing your stories about hunting with your dad. If you wanted to say anything, Jesse.
Yeah, matter of fact, Daryl, so, I was fortunate to grow up in a hunting family. My dad took me out hunting as soon as I could walk, and those are some of my earliest memories. And we had some fantastic experiences throughout my entire lifetime, really shaped who I am today. And unfortunately, immediately after an oryx hunt on White Sands Missile Range in 2015, my dad became ill and ended up passing away very unexpectedly. He was super healthy. But the memories and the experiences are like nothing I could ever put into words, really, because hunting in particular and being outdoors provides an opportunity for a father-son connection, or any connection between two human beings, really. It could be siblings, could be aunts or uncles, grandparents. But it's like if I was to go with my dad to a baseball game or a football game, you're sitting in the audience and you're watching the event, and it's cool, you're spending time together. But when we would go on multi-week wilderness adventures, I mean, we're like laying on the ground in the wilderness. There's no distractions, there's no technology. We're looking out at the stars, looking into the universe, laying beside one another on the wilderness floor after a hard day's work. And the conversations that happen, the bonding that occurs, it's just incredibly powerful. In fact, if you look at the background behind me, you can see kind of that artwork. That's an elk, and then there's a alligator juniper tree in the middle. A good friend of mine recently painted that for me. That's on a 100-year-old semaphore arm. A semaphore is like a signal that the railroads use. And I have a friend who works on the railroad, and he was upgrading the semaphores, making them more modern and digital. So that wooden semaphore arm behind me has been in existence or in operation since about 1900. And I wrote a story for Bugle magazine called The Tree of Life shortly after my dad passed. And that alligator juniper that's behind the elk on that semaphore arm was painted there by my friend to kind of as a symbol of that story, The Tree of Life, that I wrote for Bugle. So just a lot of powerful emotions, and I just think it's fantastic, the opportunities that being outdoors with people that you love provide. So yeah, anyway, thanks, Daryl. I hope that answers the question, or at least provides some perspective on the importance of these things to me and to a lot of people. The New Mexico Wildlife Federation, we get a lot of personal stories and stories sent into our publication, The Outdoor Reporter, that talk about those bonds.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you chiming in, Jesse. And that's the one thing that we as a hunting community have to do a better job relating how much the hunt, it's the experience of the hunt. It's not the trophy, it's not the prize at the end. It's the whole, from beginning to end. It's all a process that is just so ultimately rewarding, especially if you can share it with family and friends. So I appreciate you chiming in there. Again, if anyone has any questions, by all means, type them in the chat room. What I'm going to do, I believe Michael Cravens typed something in, so I'm gonna unmute you, Michael. So if you want to ask Janis your question, go right ahead. I can.
All right, thank you. And I apologize for hijacking as this might not be relatable to everybody here. If it's not, it should be. You should all be going because it's a great time. But I was wondering if Meateater was going to play any kind of role at this year's Backcountry Hunters and Anglers Rendezvous.
Funny you should ask, because I just got a phone call from Land not more than I don't know, maybe it has been 2 weeks now, to tell a couple stories at their I think it's the Friday night event where they have storytellers get on stage and tell some stories, and I told them that I would. So if you want to hear that bear story again, no, I'm kidding. I'm gonna have to come up with more different stories, but I know I'm gonna do that. And I think a few of other folks from the team are gonna be there, maybe doing some seminar type stuff. And then I know that leading up to it, they're having there like a turkey calling contest. I believe it's virtual though. And I will be judging, I believe, the semifinals. So that's all I know for the rendezvous. But yeah, anybody that can join should. I believe the dates are, what is it, like June 4, 5, 6 this year?
Second week of June. I might be off.
Hey, Michael, are you and Jonathan Odell competing again? For those of you that don't know, Michael Cravens is two-time champion of the wild game cook-off that happens at the BHA Rendezvous. So the trophy's still hanging in your house, right, Michael?
It is. It's, yeah, if I could move around, you'd see it here. To be clear though, between that contest and actually doing work for your brother, Janis, I've gotten this reputation as somebody that knows how to cook wild game. Now, to be fair, I do know how to treat wild game, and I do my best with anything I kill and bring home. But with that said, yeah, my partner Odell in that contest, he really does know what he's doing. I'm a hunter and angler that enjoys cooking, not the opposite way around. So I like it, but I get way too much credit for it, undeservingly. But yes, that we're not competing again. I thought Arizona has won the last 2 times consecutively, and I'm very proud of that. But it was a different team before us, so I thought it's only right to pass the torch on to another team and let them give it a try. Now, assuming we have volunteers, we're going to do it that way, but one of us might get thrown back in the mix. But because we won that last year, we do get to cook in the field to table dinner, which is pretty exciting and a little intimidating. We're both doing our own separate thing there. So I'm going to do something with javelina just because it represents the Southwest and I have one in the freezer, but that's the plan. I'm looking forward to it though. And Janis, it'd be great to see you guys there. I'm glad you're going.
Yeah, definitely. Look forward to meeting you in person.
It's kind of funny that we're talking cooking wild game, because there might be testosterone flowing in this particular webinar, because I know Jesse is a mean cook, but Robert Brewer is also, he's won a couple of wild game cook-offs as well. What I need to do is get some of you guys to come to that the swap event we have to prepare the wild game for all these students. But yeah, a couple of you on here can definitely outcook me, that's for sure. So what I'm going to do, Chris Red, since there hasn't been any other questions, Chris, I'm going to open you up again. If your microphone, hopefully that will get unmuted and you can give it another shot.
Hey, Daryl,
Hey,
real
guys.
quick before Chris jumps in there. Anybody that wants the best seasoning, I just got a fresh batch made. I've got 250 pounds sitting behind me. Highland Seasoning. You can find me on Facebook.
I'll attest to it. It's amazing. His seasoning and his barbecue is just, I've never had better.
Agreed. Again, for Janis, with your sort of extensive experience in Alaska hunting and being outdoors, if you could boil that down like in a pure essence to your one piece of advice for an outdoorsman moving to Alaska's interior, what do you think would be your one go-to?
That one's easy, man. Because no one told me that when I moved up there, I spent about a year up there in 2012. Save a bunch of money because it costs a lot of money to travel in Alaska. You know, you can do so much from the road system, and there's some rivers that you can line a canoe up and hike in and whatever. But if you really want to experience Alaska, it takes boats with engines or you know, jets on them. It takes airplanes, sometimes 2 airplanes. So, and those flights aren't cheap, you know. And so I remember thinking at the end of my year in Alaska, I was like, man, I can't even say I scratched the surface because I never got to actually get into the bush. So yeah, I would just save a bunch of pennies up, and that way you can at least buy yourself one flight into the bush getting up there. Or you know, the other alternative is, you know, learn to be a pilot and then go buy your own what are they called now? I got one
Bush plane.
Super Cub, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't plan on becoming a pilot, but I'll just have to, I guess, save up my pennies and do it that way.
Actually, Jesse, didn't you have a pretty decent Alaska experience earlier or late last year?
Yeah, I'm fortunate to have had quite a few Alaska experiences in my lifetime, but just last year, in fact, Steve Ranella was hunting in the Yukon Charlie Rivers National Preserve at the same time, but they got dropped off and they were hunting caribou, and I got dropped off and chose to float the entire distance across the Yukon Charlie Rivers National Preserve, 211 miles over the course of a couple of different rivers on a pack raft. So I was using a forager, a BHA model forager from Alpaca Raft. So I got dropped off, and it took me about 3 weeks to float 2 tributaries to reach the Charlie River, and then the entire distance down the Charlie River till it fed into the Yukon River, and then floated down the Yukon till I reached the village of Circle, Alaska. So it's about 211 miles completely solo. So that was actually not a very smart idea, but luckily I made it. Oh, and to Yanni's point, the bush flight, I had to catch a ride to Circle, Alaska from Fairbanks, and I didn't have transportation arranged. It's a long story, but COVID messed everything up. I thought the trip was going to be canceled, so I was completely unprepared. And then right before the trip was scheduled to happen, the pilot calls and says, hey, if you can't make it, no refunds because the state just reopened and you can now come out as long as you have a negative COVID test. So I show up in Fairbanks with my COVID test, but there's no rental cars available. There's no U-Haul cars available. So I've got to get almost 4 hours from Fairbanks to the village of Circle with all my gear. And I've got no wheels. I've got no transportation. So I'm like hitchhiking, basically trying to get to the village of Circle. I make it to the village in time to catch my bush flight. And that was a one-way bush flight that was, you know, just over an hour, probably an hour and a half or an hour and 20 minutes. And that was a $3,500 flight to get the bush pilot to take me from the airstrip in Circle, Alaska, and drop me off in the Yukon Charlie Rivers National Preserve. And then from there, as I mentioned, I made my way back to Circle via my pack raft, but I saved up for a couple of years, you know, saving my pennies, Chris, just like you're going to be doing. And it was completely worth it. I mean, I've spent $3,500 in a lot worse ways in my life, I'm sure.
Appreciate that, Jesse. Again, go ahead and type any questions you have. We'll call on people. In fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to try to put a couple of the swap students, either past students, because I see a couple of the past students, or some of the students that we're going to be taking here in the future. I might call on you and ask you to speak up about either your past experiences or what you're hoping to see. But one of the things that just popped in my mind, and Janis, I know you were kind of playing up about taking the students to a Fognac. I doubt we would ever choose that location to take the students, but what we're hoping to do is probably continue with our swap going from east to west, because those habitats and ecosystems and cultures are so different. We'll do that for a couple of years, but probably like every third year, we might do a big trip like we're doing this year with Yellowstone. Where in all your travels, because you've probably traveled the most out of everyone on this call, where would be like an amazing destination for these students, say in 2025 or whenever we do another big one? Do you have any thoughts on what would be just an absolutely amazing place to take a crew of young wildlife students, like eager to learn about the outdoors?
Geez, there's so many. You know, any national forest out west, you know, certainly tugs at my heart. Any wilderness area, you know, anywhere in Alaska is great. You know, Southeast Alaska is so cool because you can kind of do some alpine environment stuff, and yet you're right on the ocean as well. And so you sort of get to explore in two different environments very easily. You know, you're only talking, you know, 1,000 feet from the, you know, ocean. You got alpine environment, which is pretty neat. So yeah, maybe like a Southeast Alaska trip would be cool. And there's just such, I mean, talking about diversity, you know, I mean, it's wild how much stuff lives there and grows there and swims there. But yeah, I don't know if I have anything like I can't give you any of my own like spots that are real close to my heart, because I just can't give away spots like that, Daryl.
Oh, no, I understand that. One of the things that we try to do, we want to take them to see some amazing things, but we also need, like, Alaska would be great, but man, getting from place to place would be really difficult in Alaska. One of the places we threw out was Montana, and so going up towards Glacier or something like that might be further on down the road. But we usually rely on either the U.S. Forest Service or Fish and Wildlife Service or the State Wildlife Agency. They become our tour guides on these, and it's amazing. I can't tell you, there's never been an agency, federal or state, that was not thrilled to take these students out for a day to teach them whatever specialty they're working on. And so, like I said, I'm just as anxious as these students are to do some of the grizzly stuff and the gray wolf stuff. But North America, there's more to see and do in North America that it usually never even interests me to go overseas anywhere.
Hey, if I can butt in, I just like to throw it out there. If Arizona, and I know you guys do New Mexico, but you know, habitat can be night and day between the two states and two different deserts. If you ever decide to come this way, the Arizona Wildlife Federation would be happy to host you.
All right, I'm going to open up the microphone for Keith Buttemeyer. He's got a question for you, for Janis. Oops. Keith, let's see if I unmuted your microphone.
I've unmuted my microphone.
There you go.
So I'm just here because I'm a big fan of anything Daryl Radajak, of course, quality person. He left me behind here in Tennessee, but at the same time, I'm not one who's been given to taking those big trips. So my question would be, Janis, with your experience and the places you've been, and probably a great question for anybody to pitch in on, if you were going to do a first hunt where you're traveling across states, as far as is there a sweet spot of great value, chances for a successful hunt, but also being in that environment that is just, it's got that wow factor. I just wondered if you think back to what those days were, what you think would be a really cool starting point.
Yeah, the two that come to mind that seem pretty simple to do and don't require, the same kind of logistics as doing something like Jesse did, which was just like sounds like a phenomenal trip I'd love to do. But antelope or mule deer, in just about any Western state. If you have to look around and find the right hunt in the right place where you can kind of have that, scenery where you feel like you can spread your wings a little bit and do some tromping around and, not cut across roads. But at the same time, like both those species in most places that have, decent populations, which is, just about every Western state, you're going to have lots of opportunities, and it just depends on, what sort of, if you're going to set some sort of goal for yourself as, how big of a buck or big of a doe or whatever you want to kill. But yeah, that's the first Western hunt I ever did. My dad took me out and we hunted around Dead Horse, Wyoming, I believe, for antelope when I was probably 17 or so, and I just remember being blown away about it just seemed like the country never ended, because growing up in Michigan, it's like you can only see as far as the next tree line, but
Right.
there you get up on a high point and the rolling sagebrush just seems to go on forever. You're like looking at like a close antelope herd and then a one that's a little farther away and then like another herd that's really far away, right? So there's just like a lot of critters running around. And it's probably, if there were no trees in Michigan, it'd be the same way with white-tailed deer, but you can't see them because of the trees,
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be my recommendation. Wyoming, Colorado, Montana for either mule deer or antelope, I think would satiate your cravings.
That's cool. I appreciate that perspective, being able to remember back to your 17-year-old self and the images there. I know one of the things I love about watching Meateater is the time that's spent on scenery, the time that is spent on open space. You're not filling it with commercials. You're not necessarily filling it with detail. You're leaving room for the environment and the experience, and that's worth a lot as a viewer. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback.
Okay, I'm gonna call on another gentleman, Brian Peterson, who just so happens to head up Bear Smart Durango. He's joining in, and he's got a question for you, Janis.
Yeah, well, hi everybody, and thanks so much for the invite, Daryl. Glad to be on here. Huge fan of Meateater and a huge fan of everything you've been doing, Daryl. Just a question for Janis. I think one thing I just watched the show about the moose hunt up on the Brooks Range, and it made me want to get back to Alaska really, really desperately. But one of the shows that really got me was the elk hunt in the Gila down in New Mexico, where Stephen actually fires over the back of the bull elk. And that's what I love about Meateater, is that it shows that hunting doesn't always work out. And I was just curious, was that a conscious decision, or maybe do you want to just talk about that a bit?
Are you, just to clarify, are you asking, was it, did he like choose to miss?
No, what was showing that hunting doesn't always work out as planned or hoped. Was that a conscious decision to show that, as opposed to a lot of Bubba TV where it's pretty cut and dry?
Yeah, it was a conscious decision. I think before I came on, because I came on at like the tail end of season 2, they had already had to show a couple, I think a couple, I don't know if they showed misses, but they had a couple what we call skunker episodes where they simply didn't, kill an animal. And Steve tells the story of, I think it was the mountain goat hunt where him and his brother Danny went and they weren't able to harvest a goat. And, the first reaction is just like, well, we don't have a show. It's like, there's nothing to show there. And there's no, you don't think you have a story. You don't think you have a resolution. And what was interesting, and this kind of shows where Meateater sort of started to really take shape and form and how that happened early on, that it wasn't, normal, not normal, but just like sort of the path that a lot of other hunting TV had gone. It was being produced by a company called 0.0, which I can tell you 100% for sure that prior to Steve being there had never ever been anybody that had hunted, maybe fished a little bit, but definitely nobody that had ever hunted. And so, like, why I say that is like a good thing is because they came at it from a totally different perspective. And they said, well, you know what? Why do you need to kill something? Like, look at the adventure you guys just had. And you guys had these great conversations because you guys are brothers. And, there was this, you still had the hurdle of, climbing this mountain and then having to figure out if it's a nanny or a Billy. And, the resolve is that you couldn't shoot because it was skyline, or you couldn't get to it, or I can't remember exactly what happened in that episode, but it was that sort of thinking and then just a different perspective from people that didn't have any hunting background and didn't have any hunting experiences to sort of, color the way that they were going to think about or go about producing the show. And so, they put that one out there and everybody loved it. They said, wow, this is great. It's like, that's how hunting goes. You don't get to always take one home. And so from there on, it became a lot easier to show skunkers and to show misses. And I won't lie to you, I'm pretty sure at least one miss I can think of off the top of my head that wasn't shown. Sometimes what happens is you just end up having too much footage and too much content. And in any kind of creative process, you end up with doing what's called like killing your babies, where you have a lot of great ideas, but unfortunately it's got to be succinct and cut down to whether it's 22 minutes for television or it's just a succinct version of a story so that you keep people engaged. And it's a compelling story, right? If you always show everything, it's just going to be boring, because as much as we think our hunts are just like nonstop action, if you really think about it, there's just a lot of downtime that you're enjoying it because you're watching the birds, fly around and chirp, and you're watching the sunsets and the sunrises. But like, someone watching that on TV is not gonna really be engaged in watching that. So there's certainly been some misses that haven't gone in, but yeah, I usually try to push for it. Like in the moment, if someone misses or takes 3 shots, I've got an episode coming out where it's like my worst shooting performance ever, and I had to shoot a mule deer buck like 5 times, or at least shoot at him 5 times, and I can't tell you what went wrong there. I felt like my nerves were calm, but because I get to make the final decision, I'm like, look, we're going to show them all, because that's how it goes, So some days I'm just like Joe Sniper and, one shot gets it done. And then, sometimes it goes haywire and you got to like deal with the situation as it comes to you. So, yeah, early on, it wasn't conscious. It was scary. And then when we saw that people like loved it, it became a lot easier, you know, just to go with it and not be scared of showing misses or skunkers.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm sure everybody here admits that there's way more to hunting than pulling the trigger.
Yep, I agree. Thanks for asking that, Brian. I do want to ask you something, Janis, that someone on the call didn't want to put in the text because they didn't know if it was a good question, but they want to know, for you, Janis, has being a TV hunter changed you at all as a hunter in general? Like, have you changed up since you started doing the show?
I mean, it's hard to answer because like what part of the hunter are they wondering about exactly? Like, is it like, do I personally feel different or do I hunt differently? I don't feel like I really do much different. I mean, there's just a lot more, you know, thought and effort that has to go into it when you're not hunting by yourself anymore and you're dragging along, you know, 3 or 4 people. You just make more of an impression, you know, on the environment. And so you're going to get, you know, heard more, seen more by your prey. Then again, it is nice to sometimes have all those extra eyes because everybody's sort of like looking for game, you know, if there's downtime. I will say that like I appreciate having non-camera hunts and that kind of time to myself, and not necessarily to myself, you know, like being on a solo hunt, but just if it's just me and my kids, me and my wife, me and a buddy, whatever. But just having it where I don't have to be thinking about 10 other things. I can just be concentrating on the hunt. I really appreciate those, probably those days in the field more. And not that we're not having fun making, you know, hunting TV, but it's just different, you know, it's different when you're out there and you're not as just solely focused on one thing. There's a lot of other things that you need to make sure you're, you know, checking the boxes so that you end up with a good product at the end of the day.
Okay. You nailed it because she texted and said that's exactly what she wanted to hear. I'm going to call on Jesse because I think Jesse had a special request. So Jesse, you want to bring it up? We'll go a few more questions and then we'll probably start wrapping up here in a little bit. But Jesse, you're on.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. And I'll try to be quick, but I have a really close friend who wanted to be on tonight because he and his family watched Meateater religiously, but they're traveling back from Arizona from a soccer tournament or a softball tournament rather, and so they're not able to get on tonight. But the comment first I want to make is how impressed I am with the Meateater audience, because I get so many comments from people who are watching it with their kids, so many kids who are fans of the show, and also so many people who don't hunt. There is a tremendous following of the Meateater show by people who don't actually hunt, and I think that's incredibly powerful. But my buddy texted me, and his son Ethan is 7 years old, and Ethan says that his favorite moments are when Steve got charged by the moose, and of course when the grizzly charged in Alaska. But he wants to know if you can speak to that moose charge at all, Janis, if you were present in that moose charge, Steve.
Yes, I was. What's interesting about that moose charge is that it came on the heels of another grizzly bear charge that I got to be a part of, which is also part of a Meateater episode that you can see, and it's much earlier. It's probably like season 5 maybe, but it's when Ryan Callahan and Steve get charged, and then that sow grizzly comes with her 3 cubs in tow, I believe, down the hill towards me. And I did not have a camera with me to capture it, but she came down the hill and ran, basically took a beat on me and ran to within 15 or 20 yards before she veered off. But I had more time to prepare for that one. So I was double fisting bear sprays, had the safeties off, and I had a rock in front of me. But the reason I tell that story is that before that, she came down the hill, I just heard yelling in the distance. And when I heard the yelling, your brain thinks one thing. It's like, okay, they're having a bear encounter. They're trying to shoo away a bear or whatever. Well, fast forward 3 days, we're on the river. We stop on a bank and we tie up the boats, and we're kind of in some swift water. And just so that someone was staying with the boats, I stayed back with the boats, and the crew, Ryan and Steve, went hunting, and they took the photographers with them. And I'm just hanging at the boats, and I don't know, an hour goes by, and then all of a sudden I hear yelling again, and then gunshots and more yelling. And I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go again. Like there's going to be another grizzly bear coming, charging through the willows here at any moment. And it ended up being that moose instead. But that was a scary deal. I mean, anybody that's seen that footage, the fact that videographer was able to, keep the camera pointed at it and capture all that is pretty amazing. But yeah, in the end, we figured out that Steve had, just like Daryl was saying in his grizzly bear encounter, the first thing he did was shucked a shell right out. Steve, I think, as he approached the moose, he had cycled his gun once and then approached the moose. And then as he got to the moose, cycled his gun again and basically chucked the last shell out of his rifle. And so when he went to, put the finishing shot in the moose, there was no cartridge left, and the moose had enough in him to get up and almost gore him. Steve had drips of the moose's blood on the back of his waders, and he felt the brush of antler or nose or something on the back of his leg. So it was definitely hairy, no doubt about it.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that, Janis. And last question. So Ethan's brother Noah is 5 and his sister Haley is 12. And Noah and Haley would like to know, what's your favorite part of the animal to eat on the mountain after your harvest?
My favorite part of an animal to eat on the mountain, like in the field meal, I'm probably gonna go with heart or liver. If it's like a liver from a young animal, or if it's mild, I don't get into the super strong livers, but heart is like usually across the board, very tasty. And what I find it's nice about heart that the other muscles don't adhere to is, for whatever reason, the heart doesn't seem to be as afflicted by rigor mortis, where if you're on the mountain and you've just killed an animal and rigor mortis sets in, just about every single piece of meat, steak, tenderloin, backstrap, whatever you do, and I've even tried it with backstraps and pounded them thin, that rigor mortis has those muscles just so tensed up that you're going to be chewing hard. But for whatever reason, the heart doesn't really seem to be affected by the rigor as much. And I don't usually cut them in big slices like Steve does. I usually will trim it out a little bit more and end up with just a lot of smaller pieces, and then usually just, fry them in a hot pan as fast as possible, and maybe make like a little quick pan gravy or something, and eat them like that.
Awesome. Thank you, Janis.
You're welcome.
I'm going to chime in here with a comment because Jesse brought it up, and I do want to reiterate what he said, because Jesse said how wonderful the Meateater show and podcast are for folks that aren't big into hunting. I have a little side business I do called Wildlife for You, where we teach people about wildlife. And I'll tell you what, Janis, we have about 10,000 followers to this Wildlife for You, and the vast majority of my demographic are women between like 30 and 85, because they love wildlife, they feed the birds, they do all, but they don't know to go to a state wildlife agency, or they don't know where to get information. And so that's the demographic I'm trying to hit. One of the things I did last year was, it was called the Green Fire Tour after Aldo Leopold. And folks signed up to go on this week-long excursion in northern New Mexico, where I took them to see bighorn, to go see elk in the caldera, just touring all over northern New Mexico. And I will tell you, the favorite thing that I keyed them on to is we would, as we're driving, we would listen to either a Meateater podcast, the one they fell in love with. And just so you know, this was 6 women of mature age. They fell in love with Ryan Callahan's Week in Review. They thought he had the most sultry voice out there, which I don't get, but they absolutely had a blast. And I do that all the time, on whether or not it's on that Facebook page or on our website for Wildlife for You. I'm always referring them to Meateater podcast or the Week in Review, because it's such good conservation information, and that's what we lack. And like I said, most people don't know where to turn for that information. They don't realize that Game and Fish Commission is the go-to person there. And so we're trying to fill that void and draw more women in, and then slowly introduce them to these other aspects, the consumptive. They all dined on wild game when they were out here. Is pretty awesome. We do have someone that hopefully, let's see if he's ready. Believe it or not, Karl, if you could hear us and unmute, Karl just texted me. Are you there, Karl?
I am, and if you want to read people the explicit message I sent you with all the 4-letter words, you're welcome to, man.
I didn't
I'm
get
going to
that
turn on my
one.
camera. Don't actually read that. So what I texted to Daryl was basically, let me back up. I'm going to say I'm a dude who believes in owning your mistakes. And I've got 4 super rotten willow trees on my place here in Wisconsin. We moved into a new house back in August. And I've been, since dawn this morning, pulling down these crusty, rotten willow trees. And I came inside just now to do a water break and grab my phone. And I saw this message from Daryl saying, "Hey, man, see you in a few minutes." And I just totally, completely spaced out this afternoon. And I feel terrible about that. And rather than just, making up some crazy excuse, I'll just say I'm sorry, man, and apologize for being here late. Totally on me. I will say, as I was pulling down these rotten willow trees this afternoon, I had a big gobbler walk within 30 yards of me while I was running my chainsaw right on the edge of my yard. So that bodes well. We've got a little acreage here, so I'm thinking spring turkeys any minute when the season opens up. And I also, Daryl, another thing I texted you is that my phone or my computer may restart. So I'm trying to get on with the phone as well. I've been listening to the Q&A for a few minutes. I know you guys have been on for a while. Let me check my restart status here, because I know I'm going to get cut off like mid-sentence with you guys.
Well, I'll
All right.
embarrass you, Karl, because
Go ahead.
At the very beginning, I gave Janis a brief background about the SWAT program, gave him about a 5-minute slide presentation. And I had a couple of slides giving kudos to you because you participated in the one in 2017 and then again in 2019. And so I had some photographs of you from both those, and it looks like you're wearing the exact same thing in both of them. So
I'm a man.
I swear
I'm a
it's
man
2
of
years apart. It was 2 years
consistent
apart.
style.
So
Well, I did just put on a collared t-shirt from my closet. I took off my like yellow chainsaw dirty
Nomex.
outer garment for you guys. But no, man, I may not have much in the way of diversity of apparel, but I do have a lot of respect for the SWAT program. And Robert, it's great to see you on the screen along with a bunch of other familiar faces. I guess what I would say here in the next couple minutes before this computer automatically restarts and I have to sign back in, a couple things. One is, I think I'm looking at the screen here and I'm seeing a lot of folks that are like, young adult to middle age or so, if I'm being gracious, right? And I want you to just like think back to, being in your late teenage years and what a sort of important crossroads that is. And the experience that the SWAT program gives folks at a pivotal time in their development professionally, that's one of the major highlights that I would point to. The other thing is just the opportunity to build community with people who you might not necessarily spend a lot of time with. I think the whole idea of getting people, from different parts of the country, exposed not only to each other's ecosystems, but also just to the culture. A young late teenager in New Mexico interacting with somebody in that same age group from Tennessee is going to be a revelation of, major value. And then that layered on top of just the quality of people that Robert and Daryl have been able to pull together as professional instructors and mentors. I've had some really deep and valuable conversations with participants. I think, certainly from my perspective and hopefully from theirs as well, I took a lot away. So Daryl, I'm gonna sign back in like ASAP. I'm gonna get kicked off here in just a second. My computer's gonna restart. But again,
what I'm gonna chime in before you get booted. I just unmuted Charlene Wanico. I think you remember talking to her at the Aldo Leopold cabin, Carl. Hopefully you don't get logged off. But Charlene,
I do. And
Charlene, if you wanted to say, Charlene, just so everyone knows, was a swap student who traveled to Tennessee back in 2018, and then she assisted us in 2019 when students came to visit her home place in New Mexico. Charlene, if you could just tell us what this swap program did, and hopefully Karl will come back. But if you want to say anything, Charlene, you're on the floor.
Okay, well, hello everyone. My name is Charlene. I go to New Mexico State University studying wildlife ecology, and I will finally be graduating in December. And so SWAP was an extreme, huge thing for me. I've never traveled to Tennessee, and experiencing that extreme humidity was completely foreign to me. And discovering the fireflies firsthand. There was a great majority of the stuff that I learned out there that was so new to me, and without SWAP, I definitely would not have been educated on what was happening out there, the ecosystem, and just the whole thing. It was super nice. It was super amazing. Got to meet a lot of new people, and I always have Brewer's voice in the back of my head here and there, because I was somehow, some way, I was always late, but he was always like, "Come on, let's go, Charlene." It was always me, but yeah, overall, it was a really great experience. And then being able to mentor when the Tennessee students came here to New Mexico was also amazing. Daryl mentioned that we went to Valles Caderas, and that's one of my favorite ultimate spots to go hiking at, because it's the scenery is just it doesn't look real, it looks so green screen. I call it green screen scenery. And it was just amazing, especially while also back in Tennessee, I never would have thought I would go whitewater rafting. I'm a very big adrenaline seeker, so that was cool. And then I got the amazing chance to meet Karl, and so the thing that really sticks to my head is what he said to me was, "If you're not going to do it, who else is going to?" And it just keeps going on in my head and everything. So it's really exciting to see everyone here and just hear everybody's amazing stories. And I've actually reached out to Daryl about probably a month ago talking about bears, because they always say at your end of your undergraduate, you would easily somehow, some way figure out what animals you want to specifically study. And I've come to discover I am very frequent with bears nowadays. So all these different stories about bears is super intriguing, and especially with Alaska, because that's somewhere where I really want to go to.
Thank you so much, Charlene. I can't thank you enough for popping on here. We do it for you guys. I guarantee we could stay here for another couple hours talking about some of the individual students and experiences we had, and every one was a life lesson. 90, I'm not going to say 100% of them were positive, because we had to deal through One of our students tearing her ACL, planes getting delayed and overnight in Atlanta, vehicles breaking down, but they were all learning experiences, and the life lessons the students get from SWAP, they carry with them throughout the rest of their entire life. So thank you so much, Charlene. I don't know if Karl, you're still on there or not, but
I think I am on my phone, hopefully. Are you
yes,
getting me
you
okay?
are. Yeah,
Okay,
I
sweet.
knew you and Charlene had a really deep and wonderful talk at the Leopold cabin.
In all those backyard in Tres Piedras, that was definitely a conversation I will never forget as well, Charlene. And as soon as I saw your face on the screen, you know, our time together there, it came flooding back for sure. And I love the fact that you remember that comment. You know, I could sense the passion that you were bringing into your work, and you know, that whole idea of wanting to be a source of change. And you know, I was thinking of Charlene recently, because we have this incredible you know, momentous pick for Secretary of Interior with Deb Haaland, a real leader from New Mexico. And it's just, you know, another sort of timely example of anything being possible if you you know, if you believe in yourself and make yourself the source of change. And so, you know, I look forward to hearing Charlene's name come up again down the line and seeing what great things you accomplish. And Daryl, you know, now that I don't have the clock ticking down, I know we're getting a little bit late here, but I do want to say just a couple of other things briefly about SWAP. And you know, I think when I look back on my own sort of educational experience, a lot of the immersive sort of learning that I did, it was outside of school. It was not part of the curriculum. It was the time that I had, you know, in the woods and on the water recreating. And I think, unfortunately, for folks that are going to be getting into natural resources, we're not going to be able to operate under the assumption that those sorts of experiences are part and parcel for everybody growing up who might want to work in these career fields. And so, you know, to have an opportunity to have a curriculum that's pulled together that puts people in these places and gives them that personal set of experiences that they can point to, that they're never going to get in a lecture hall, they're never going to get through a collection of PowerPoints. I really, you know, I believe that these are the sorts of experiences people are going to be looking back on and drawing on for the rest of their careers, the rest of their lives. And the source of inspiration that can help people identify a particular career track and say, yes, this is in fact what I want to do. And for any of us who work in natural resources, you know, and that could be, you know, like in the industry that Janis is a part of, or it could be folks that are in public service or academia. If you're in conservation, there are personal experiences that led you down this path 100% of the time. If you chose to do this work, it's rooted in who you are as a person. And without those sort of gateway experiences, I don't think the light bulb necessarily is going to turn on for everybody who has that light bulb built into them. So, you know, I really admire and applaud Daryl and Robert for what they've done. I'm eager to support the program any way I can in the future. And I do believe the work that you guys are doing is really, it's a gateway for people, a gateway to their career. And oftentimes that's going to be in service. So you guys are awesome for what you do. Charlene, it was a highlight. You know, I'll be totally honest with you guys. When I saw that text message earlier, there's part of me that just wanted to like hide out and say, you know, like send Daryl an apology. But I said, you know what, I got to try to at least get on if these folks are still on. And having an opportunity to hear those words from Charlene made it totally worth it. So I'm glad I swallowed my pride. And again, heartfelt apology for my tardiness in joining you, Daryl, but really appreciate what you guys do.
No, I'm so glad you joined in, Karl. And your words resonate, because I truly believe that a lot of these students just need that moment in time that they can look back on and say, man, I am so thankful for that. In fact, Chris Red, I just unmuted you. Chris has asked Janis a couple of questions. Chris was in the very first SWAP from 2017. Chris, if you want to tell us what it did for you, and in fact, you could even tell us how you even came back to New Mexico the following year because you were so impressed.
I was lucky enough to be part of the initial crew, and definitely thanks to Daryl and Brewer for making that happen and pulling that together. It was an amazing experience. I think I was a little older than most of the other students, being an adult student who's, pursuing a degree in natural resource management now at my slightly more advanced age than your normal college student. But I also wanted to, during that amazing experience, echo the same sentiment that Charlene had. I had a pretty brief conversation with Karl over lunch in the Valle Caldera, and kind of got the same, the same lasting sentiment from it. If not us, if not me, then who was gonna, make that change going forward and ensure that these resources will be around, for my kids or what have you. But yeah, I fell in love with New Mexico in a big way while I was there. I had never really experienced the West in a big way, coming from Georgia and then Tennessee. But the following summer, in addition to helping mentor the New Mexico kids when they came here, I packed up my wife and we went back to New Mexico for almost 2 weeks to visit a lot of the same places. New Mexico climbed really high on the list of places I'd like to be after graduation. So I wanted to get my wife out there and make sure she, was copacetic with it, that she enjoyed the area and things like that. And it was a huge hit with us both. So that was really high on my list of places to wind up after graduation. It looks now, my wife has just accepted a job with the federal government in Alaska. So it looks like we're headed up that way, which should also be a huge adventure with plenty of, resource management opportunities. So that should be a lot of fun as well.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for that. Anyway, we have been talking for quite a long time. Karl, I do totally understand. We all have done it at one point or another where you just, something slips your mind. So please don't feel bad. Janis has kept the ship going all night long. Janis, is there anything else you want to ask of us or say or mention or anything else? Or actually, before Janis, before I get to you, Robert, is there anything you want to add or chime in? I will tell you, it's not just the students that can hear Brewer's voice in the back of your mind when he gets on. So he's got the thing where you perk up where Brewer's on the march. So it's a great voice to keep students in line. So Robert, you're on the floor.
Yeah, and for those of you that are on that are going this year, you'll learn what my whistle means, and you'll learn early is on time is late, and sleep when you're dead is one of my mottos. But no, I really enjoy this as well. Enjoy getting to see the students, light up at different things. And most of these places I've never seen either. But one thing that most college students going into the wildlife field don't get to experience is they don't get to experience what's really happening in the field in their first 2 years. And so by the time they get to their junior year, they're 3 years deep in college, and all of a sudden they may decide, ooh, this is not for me. And my goal is they're going to know it's for them and they're 100% into it in their first year, or they're going to know it's not for them in their first year. And they don't waste 2 or 3 years of college on that and backtrack and spend extra time in college. So I look at these trips as not just giving them opportunities for the people that definitely are going to, but also an opportunity for those that may say, well, this may not be the field for me. It's not what I thought it was. Steve Irwin didn't lead a trip out here to pet crocodiles. Okay. It's a little bit different. And don't get me wrong, I had nothing against Steve Irwin or any of the shows like that. That's not everything that we do, and they need to see every side of it. So we try to bring in the cultural aspects of it. We try to bring in, the non-wildlife stuff. And I know I got in the wildlife field. I was lucky. We were still doing restoration. I got to trap and handle and tag a lot of animals and move them around and things like that. Those days are about gone. And it's totally different now. So they need to see what it is. What are they getting into? And I think SWAP does that. Just takes it to another level for them. And I appreciate people like Karl that come out and help us as well. I can't tell them everything, or I could tell them everything. They're not going to listen to me. They will listen to a professional in the field that's living it every day. So I really appreciate all of our partners as well.
Thanks, Robert. Appreciate that. Jesse, do you have any last words?
Daryl, I just, I obviously sincerely thank you and Robert for all your hard work. Dr. Malcolm has done so much for SWAP, so much for the Wildlife Federation and conservation in general. Super glad you joined us, Karl. And also, I just really want to thank you, Janis, for taking the time to join us on a Sunday evening. I know you've got a million things going on, and for you to carve out some time to participate in this program and spend some time with us answering questions was really an honor. So thank you very, very much. And thank you to everybody who joined. I look forward to hearing the stories of this upcoming trip. Sounds like it's going to be one to remember.
Thanks, Jesse. And I'll go last. I also want to say a huge thanks. Karl, don't worry about being late. I'm glad you can join. Glad we work together, and I hope to get you on a couple future events. And Janis, I know exactly how busy you are, and I can't thank you enough for agreeing to sit in on tonight's webinar, learn a little bit more about the SWAP program, but you helped us raise a little bit of money for this year's trip. And I sincerely appreciate that everything goes back to these students. So is there anything final you want to say, Janis? Because then we'll let you get back to whatever you were doing.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna say I'm honored that you guys choose me to, that I could actually help, raise some money for an awesome program like this. I wish that there would have been a Daryl around introducing me to a SWAP opportunity when I was deciding not to go to school and coming out here. But maybe something like that might have got me, into the field even earlier. Yeah, by doing this, you got me out of cooking dinner and putting the kids to bed, so it wasn't all bad. So I appreciate that. But no, I think it's a great thing that you're doing, and let me know if I can help you in the future, please.
Thank you. Very, very much appreciate that. And thank you to all who participated and who purchased tickets for this, and any of the students that are on tonight's webinar. If you're joining us this July, you're in for a real treat. And keep an eye out. We do have a Facebook page that is the Student Wildlands Adventure Program. By all means, follow us on there, because you'll keep up to date, especially during the trip. We'll be posting things at Facebook page. We also do have a SWAP website. It's swapwildlife.org. You can find information there. But thank you again to everyone who joined in tonight. We will have a recording of tonight's webinar. It'll be posted on the New Mexico Wildlife Federation page, but we'll hopefully get it onto the SWAP wildlife page. But thank you again, Janis. Thank you again, Karl, and all who have joined in tonight. We really appreciate it, and we will be in touch. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Daryl.
You'll make it up to me, Karl. Don't worry.
I understand. If I'm running chainsaw, I don't want to quit either.
Thanks, Jesse, for hosting this. Appreciate it.
Oh, it was a pleasure, Daryl. Thanks for putting it together, sir.
No problem. And I would still love for you to come up. If you could swing that last week of July, Jesse, man, it would be a treat for us to have you help with the students.
All right. Well, I'm gonna, like I told you, I'll work on that.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Jesse. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Daryl.
All right. Bye.